All right, welcome everyone to the March meeting of the Cable Television Advisory Board. Looks like we're still shy of a quorum, but we'll do attendance. If I can. All right, Andrew Sonoda's here, Dorothy Clark, Bruce Cottignone, Richard Ferenkopf, Brian Garrity. Ken Gage, Sally Highland.
Here.
Ernest Jett. Ed Leicius.
Yep.
Jennifer McCormick. And Brian Rhodes. All right, Mr. Painert, I understand we don't have the minutes from last month, but those will be on their way.
I will send those out as soon as I get them.
All right, your report.
All right. Our current balance of our operating account 2505 is $721,669. Our expenses for February 2019, including salaries and facility operations, totaled $17,766. Excuse me. We had 1,196 cable casts total in February, and of this, 19 were live events, and this broke down to on Education 99.7 and Government 16.11. We had 1,177 playbacks, and of this, Public 96 had 626, Education 99, 304, and Government 16, 247. Excuse me. On February 21st, we attended the FCC rule change meeting in Derry, hosted by Alliance for Community Media President Mike Wassenaar and ACM New England President Erica Jones. We went over several scenarios that might arise and discussed how each organization needs to prepare for an inevitably changing cable landscape over the coming years. What is clear is that any changes aren't going to happen overnight. So we do have time to plan ahead and continue to move forward with fiscally responsible caution. Pete?
For February, for the Education Channel, on the 1st, we provided live coverage of the Battle of the Bridge boys and girls basketball games from Nashua South. Also, on the 6th, we provided live coverage of Bishop Girton at Bedford hockey, and that was courtesy of BCTV in Bedford. On the 9th, we recorded the Braintree at Bishop Girton girls basketball game. 15th, we provided live coverage of BG at Nashua South boys basketball. On the 16th, we did live coverage of the District 2 wrestling state finals, and that was courtesy of Goffstown TV. On the 18th, we recorded the South Pelham versus North Sauhegan hockey game at Conway Arena. 19th, we were over doing Park Recreation Boys Junior Biddy Basketball Championships, and the following night we did the girls game, and those were at Amherst Street School. Also on the 20th, we recorded Nashua Sings, which is an annual all-school choral music festival that was held at Nashua South. On 27th, we recorded South Pelham at Bishop Girton hockey, and that was at Skate 3 Arena. And also on the 27th, we did live coverage of the North at Bedford girls basketball game, and that also was courtesy of BCTV. So we've been doing a lot more sharing of programming, especially live programming recently between stations, and that's, I think, a good thing. So we can get, if Bedford's doing a game live, we're able to take that technology that's out there today easily and rebroadcast that. Similarly, tonight we're doing the Nashua North boys game at Salem. Salem TV's doing that. We're just going to take their feed and utilize it. And we've done that for other stations in the past on our side. So it's a sort of a win-win situation for everybody. So.
Question.
Sure.
Can you do the live feed immediately? Can you use their live
Yes.
feed and
Yeah.
not wait to rebroadcast it, but
So
do it
what
right away?
typically what we're doing, either we stream our channels 24/7, so we can either take a feed like that into our new Telview system, or they have something new which is only a few months old, but you can take a live stream off of YouTube.
Oh.
And since they're using YouTube this evening, we can put in the address for that live feed, and it will take it off of YouTube and put it onto our channel, so,
Oh, good.
yeah.
Thank you.
All right. I'd like to note for the record that Alderman Jettie and Chief Rhodes have joined the meeting.
I was here before Chief Rhodes.
Yes. I had my sequence incorrect there. All right. Is there a motion with regard to the reports from Mr. Painert and Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Chairman, I passed out Access Nashua's report. Dick's not here today,
Yes.
so everybody will have that.
Does anyone have any questions about Access Nashua's report? If not, is there a motion?
Move to accept as presented.
All right, motion to accept. All those in, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. All right. Mr. Lucius, do you have anything for us?
Nothing to report. We have a meeting coming up on March 12th.
Okay. And I don't see any old business or new business, so,
Chairman?
yes.
Did you have a chance to check into the feasibility of adjusting our meeting schedule?
Well, I think that the Alderman was going to be looking into proposing something at the Aldermanic Board. Have you,
May I?
please?
So, I thought we all got the same communication that, I can't remember, was it you or
Bruce?
was it Bruce?
Yeah, the IT.
Someone from the city pointed out that the ordinance that talks about our meetings says that they are ad hoc.
Oh, okay.
So the
I
ordinance
must have
does
missed
not
that email.
provide or does not require that we meet at all. So I would, and I thought that I had communicated that to you. And so I would like to, if it's appropriate, I would like to make a motion. I think it's within your discretion when you call meetings, but I would like, if you need a motion, if you, just to get the sense of the rest of us, I would like to move that we only meet when necessary at the call of the chairman, so that the monthly reports, the financial stuff and the reports, everything, that could all be sent to us electronically or by mail. And when an issue comes up that needs our attention, you could call a meeting for that purpose.
That sounds good. That's, so we have a motion. I would like to hear everyone's take on that. So is there any discussion of the motion?
I think personally, monthly meetings are overkill. Maybe just dialing down the schedule a little bit once a quarter, things like that might be more appropriate. I think there are things that come up and are worth discussing, but certainly monthly appears to be overkill, so that would be my suggestion.
We tend to think that having a quarterly meeting would at least allow people to come out who may be coming from the public. We don't have it very often, but occasionally we do. And if it was just an ad hoc meeting, I don't think that they would have adequate notice potentially to make a meeting.
I think even with ad hoc meetings, would still have notice requirements that would need to be made. So there would be notice, but all right. Any other comments?
I would think regularly scheduled meetings on the same day, whether it's bi-monthly or quarterly, would be useful just to have it in a schedule. The other thing is that when things do come up, there may be a shorter time period, as there was with all of this FCC rule change thing. I didn't hear about it until the meeting where it was the last day of the opportunity to provide some input into that. And so, because we had missed 2 meetings. So I think that sort of thing needs to be brought into consideration.
Yeah,
So maybe every other month or something like that, I would suggest.
All right. So that was discussion on the motion. We'll call the question. So all those in favor of Alderman Jetti's motion,
Which would be what? Would you repeat
which
it?
was, I believe, ad hoc meetings at the discretion of the chair. Now, I think basically the discretion of the chair would probably be quarterly, but
So I'm getting the sense of the group that at least making it, let's start with quarterly to see how that works out. Regularly scheduled, but only once a quarter.
okay. Well, I guess since it was a motion, we do have to have a vote. So all those in favor?
So just to clarify, so I guess I'm amending my motion to make it so that we meet quarterly
Okay.
instead of monthly.
And I think we need to vote on amending the motion. So all those in favor of amending the motion to make it quarterly?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion's amended. Now let's vote on the motion. So adopting a quarterly schedule. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, so motion passes.
And this is the end of the first quarter right now, so maybe the next one would be June.
Okay, sounds good. Ms. Hyland?
I would like to hear a little bit more explanation of the meeting and all of the FCC rule change that occurred, and also what the implications are for this, this organization.
All right, well, you know, one thing we do know for certain right now is that because many people are going over to the internet and they're not having cable, and of course our revenue is directly, you know, comes from cable TV. So we are losing revenue now. I mean, there's a certain percent that has started to happen. And so we know that's just reality. That's what's happening. And without a rewrite or anything new on the Cable Act, that's going to continue because people will continue to migrate over to the internet and get their TV that way, which we're not included in. I mean, that's not a revenue stream for us. So that's happening. The probable, or at least what the FCC is trying to do right now is say that we cost the cable companies, you know, that's to broadcast our channels, right? And all that we cost, they're going to be allowed to charge that back. So they could say, well, you cost 30% of the franchise fees that we pay right now. You cost us in order to get your channels out over our system, and so we're going to charge you that back. And that's what's going on right now. And you know, it's all in the wording how it ends up that whether they could take 30% or 50% or whatever. It's got, you know, those details aren't there yet because they haven't voted on it. They haven't specified. They just said it's coming, right? And the worst case scenario would be if it goes to the Supreme Court and they rule that the Cable Act of 1984 is unconstitutional. Then that throws everything up in the air. And that's hopefully improbable. But that is a scenario that could happen. So am I saying that?
I think you're correct. I think that in the first, certain, they're anticipating a decline in revenues of 5 to 10% per year for people leaving cable television. We've been a little bit insulated from that in Nashua with the number of housing units that have been going in, multiple housing units. So we really haven't lost a lot to that. What we've gained in new subscribers, I think, has offset that. We did lose, due to an accounting change that was done by Comcast nationally, 10% about a year ago. But since then, our quarterly revenues have been right around $110,000 for the cable TV portion of it. As far as the probable is concerned, talking about the FCC rules change, they're anticipating that that will likely happen toward the end of this year. But it remains to be seen if it will go into effect immediately or not, because there's likely to be a number of challenges by larger communities that can afford to challenge the law, and whether or not they judge determines whether they can charge those fees during the lawsuit or not. So that's up in the air. And the possible he was talking about with the Supreme Court, they actually had a case that was heard before them almost just about 2 weeks ago, and the case was regarding somebody who said that they were being sort of blackballed by their community access station and are not allowed to be on the air. They're looking that may open the door for cable companies to come in and say, well, we shouldn't have to be providing this service anyhow. So they're looking to see if they can determine that it's unconstitutional that the FCC can require a private company to provide communities with PEG access. So that's where we're at.
So what does that mean for cable TV or for the public television here in Nashua? Do we have to then look forward to asking the city for financing of the
That's a
operation?
potential. As of right now, we get 1.3% of the franchise fees. So there is additional franchise fees, out there that the city is putting into, I think it's 2.7%, because we collect 4% total. The FCC allows the city to take up to 5%. So the city could ask Comcast to change the rate to 5%, and that would soften the blow a little bit. That's what Bedford just did. They went from 4% to 5% to soften the blow as far as financially. We've been very diligent in our spending. We have some money still in our special revenue account. And some of that obviously is needed for new equipment from time to time. We're looking at putting new cameras in this room and also over at the Nashua North Lecture Hall, since they're both still standard definition channels.
I'm just gonna say, but how we do that might change, meaning that we wanted to do a certain type of install in here of high def, and that would require new cables, new everything. I mean, it would just be, it would be a very large project, as this was when we first put it in. But it may be that now we scale it back and we go with, different type of high definition cameras, right? That also, and then we put, that the switcher that you had approved a few months ago doesn't go in the upstairs. It comes down here, hooks up to the high def cameras and the infrastructure that's there stays there. So it's a much more modest install, but we still get high def. It's just not, it's not where we wanted to be, where we would have been otherwise. I mean, we've been frugal and keeping the money in there, but I think we have to be that much more because we don't know what's going to happen. So it might be a scale down, an upgrade, but a scale down from where we would have gone otherwise.
I think the other thing to consider is, while the PEG requirement is perhaps subject to court challenge, I'm not sure that the franchise fees would be.
Yeah,
Or there would be some, because there's still a use of public right-of-ways, even if that act were invalidated, I'm thinking that there would be there would be funding.
Something like that, yeah.
Right.
And
there are alternative ways of getting our signal, which we've been, good at doing over the last few years. There are still access stations that are not streaming, so folks on the internet that are only on the internet can get our signal still.
We're definitely ahead of the curve on that.
you know, gone, and now with our new system, we can use OTT or over-the-top broadcasting as well. So we have a Roku and an Apple TV channel. So there are other ways that people could get us, and if it comes to that they want to charge 50% of our franchise fees, maybe we take a look at saying, well, we don't need the cable channel at all. You guys can take that back, and we'll take the franchise fees instead and put that toward just streaming options. So.
But
So
does
a
that-
couple of points I just wanted to clarify. If the existing wiring in here is category 5, you shouldn't have to look at replacing the wiring in any way, shape, or form. So it should just be, upgrading the cameras themselves. And that should substantially change the cost because from what I understand, when they had to rewire this, that was substantial. The second thing is I think what we're talking about at this point in regards to the franchise agreement is they may have a legal precedent to defund, okay? But that's from a technical standpoint. When you talk about companies that size, just because they can doesn't necessarily mean they should. So you're dealing with a bit of a public relations nightmare for them to say, yeah, we don't have to do that anymore, so we're not going to do that anymore. And that's why I think, if I'm understanding it, and I have done some reading on this, but if I'm understanding it, right now we're looking to find out what they can do. But I believe we still have a card in our deck to play, which is, just because they can doesn't mean they should.
Right,
And I think that was what Mr. Christensen told you last month when you spoke to him about it, is that right now they don't anticipate exercising the provisions of the new.
Basically, that was exactly
That
what he
was
was saying.
his-
We're the third arm. We're
At the
something that's
meeting
gonna
that
stay there.
we attended, the ACM said that in certain jurisdictions, at least Comcast has already said that they will. But that, may be geographically based on, certain areas. I don't know. So it all remains to be seen.
And that's probably where the logistical battle will come in. If they say, okay, we don't have to, but we will, then it's, well, your cable revenues are dropping by this percentage, so over the next 10 years, there may not be a percentage of any cable. All your revenue might be in internet or things like that. So what do we do in that provision? How long are you going to continue doing this for? Because as much as we'd like to respect your word, we need something that says this is what will happen.
right. And since Comcast bundles internet and cable as well as other things together, that's something that I would think would be in their PR interest to maintain. One question, though, is that if as you say, with the fees for use of right-of-way or something like that, that the city might get, it may be useful to approach the city and get that part of that.
Well, that's
2.7
right
or
now,
something
they
like that.
can't do that because of the Cable Act. But if the Cable
Okay.
Act were, which there are a number of different ifs there before we.
Right.
So I think it's probably premature to approach the city for a percentage
Oh,
of
sure,
funding
but
that
that-
doesn't exist.
It's something in the future, maybe.
But-
Yeah. But in terms, if this does go away, does the studio go away? Do the programs go away? Or do they just switch over to being available on the internet?
Well, we can only hope. I mean, but it's, as far as I
think the big thing is, where does the funding come from in the future? If the funding, decreases to a point where, our reserves are no longer there, it's then incumbent the city makes a decision as to, well, we believe that, this is something that's important, which, I believe that it is. We have a lot of people that watch the government meetings and the education Board of Education meetings, and other programming that's there. So as long as it's available to people, whether it's on the cable system or not, as a cable TV channel, it's going to be up to the city to determine, whether it's in their best interest and fiscally responsible. As our revenues go down, so does the 2.7% that the city's collecting right now. So
Yeah.
that's going to continue to go down as well. So whether they're going to want to share a portion of that into the future,
Yeah.
seen. So
Thank you very much.
Any other discussion? Alderman.
So the amount that Comcast charges people, is that what whatever the market will bear, or are they regulated, and if so, by whom?
they're not regulated, so they can charge whatever the market will bear. And obviously, when they make rate increases, you start to see on the internet, how do I get rid of cable? I can't, afford this any longer. And people come up with suggestions, but like they said, they're anticipating about 5 to 10% a year will actually make that jump. They may downgrade a cable package, but we still are only paid the franchise fee based on cable television revenues. So they can't charge it based on internet portion or the telephone portion. It's just on what people are paying for TV. And that's why last year we lost the 10%. They changed the way they are accounting for those bundled packages. And they're saying that the television portion of that bundle is now less. So, I don't know what the figures would be, but, let's say it's a $99 bundle package. Now they're going to take, 70% for internet, 10% for telephone, and 20% for cable TV, whatever it happens to be. So that's what they're now basing that on, and that was the fee change that happened last year. So
To be clear though, Alderman, I mean, even without this FCC ruling, from a legal standpoint, they could defund us tomorrow by basically saying, sign up for Comcast Internet and we'll give you cable for free. If they were to do that, they're not legally required to give us a dime. So, I mean, what we're talking about here is what can be done versus what should be done.
Alderman.
If I could follow up. And what determines that? The fact that they that we can only charge them based on the cable portion, is that something in the federal law?
FCC.
That's the Cable Act of 1984.
Cable Act of '84.
Okay, so if that were changed, so that local municipalities could charge based on the internet use, that would,
have to be a federal change.
yeah.
And that would
Total revenue.
necessitate Congress basically,
Doing something.
well, not just doing something, but actually passing an act that would add up to 5% tax on people's internet.
Which would not go over well.
However, the issue that would still would be the public ways.
Right.
The fact that telephone poles, roadways, everything else.
It's being delivered in
Those are
the
still
same
within the
fashion, yeah.
municipality, so.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, if this conversation were to go in a bad direction, we could increase our rental space, so to speak, for right-of-way.
And that's not something that we get any part of, but as far
Well,
as.
the city could,
Yeah,
correct.
city could.
Yeah, that wouldn't necessarily mean that this board got, this group got any of it, but
Right,
that.
there'd have to be a legislative conduit for that.
Any other discussion? All right. Is there a final motion?
Move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. See everyone in June then.